Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 769. Dance 3. Chapter 769. Dance 3. The situation within the hall had grown stagnant. With every song that played, a new person would take their shot, only to be cruelly rejected by Delilah with a soft, "No, I'm sorry." It had gotten to a point where nobody cared anymore and just did it to try. Staring at the scene, Aoife started to calm down. Right, there's no way she's going to accept my brother just like that. Of course she wouldn't. Aoife eased visibly as she picked up a cup of wine, taking small sips. She had always liked alcohol. It helped her unwind. It was also in that moment that she started to think about the situation. Now that I think about it, this entire situation doesn't make sense at all. The goal from the beginning had been to introduce her mysterious fiancé. Everyone present had gathered to catch a glimpse of him. Yet when the moment arrived, instead of being presented with the man himself, they were confronted with this strange game. From how she had rejected practically everyone present, it suddenly became clear that she never had any intentions to accept anyone else but her fiancé. In that case, what was the Duke's goal? Why was he playing this game? Taking another sip of her wine, Aoife looked at Leon. "Why don't you?" Her words trailed off at the sound of a sudden commotion. Blinking slowly, she caught sight of Leon's face growing rigid before turning her head toward the source of the noise. "Huh!" Her mouth hung open, wine nearly spilling out from her mouth. She wasn't the only one to react like this. Not far from her, Kira and Evelyn both stopped whatever they were doing as they stared in the direction of the noise, their faces growing slack moments later. "That's PFTTTT. Kira ended up spitting whatever food she had in her mouth. Some even got on Evelyn's clothes, but she was in such shock that she didn't even seem to notice. At once, all eyes drew towards the figure walking in Delilah's direction. His strides were steady, his expression composed. Beneath the glow of the chandelier, his presence captured the attention of many, rivaling even Delilah's, as his calm gaze came to rest on her. With light clothes, contrasting Delilah's dark dress, Julian eventually came to a stop before her. The two stared at each other, and the venue grew quiet. "What sort of game are you playing?" I stared at the woman before me, noting the gentle curl of her lips as she looked my way. It was the same smile she had given everyone else who approached her, yet I could clearly sense that, when turned on me, it carried something different. Amusement? Joy? I could have probably checked by using my emotive magic, but I held back. Instead, under the watchful eyes of everyone present, I started to speak. "There's not much that I can offer you. At least, not much that you've already gotten." Delilah was a figure who stood at the top of the world. Be it wealth, fame, or connections, she was a tier above me in everything. There wasn't much that I could offer her that she couldn't offer herself. Being with me will most likely lead to a lot of moments of pain. I won't be able to make you happy even if I wanted to. You'll probably end up resenting me a lot in the future. The smile that lingered on Delilah's face slowly faded as I spoke. Her expression revealed her surprise, her eyes seeming to ask, "What are you doing? What are you saying? Why would you say this?" And yet I still continued. "I know myself that I am not the most likable person. I'm blunt, often disappear, and I am quite the liar. My flaws, I was all too clear with them." So was she as she began to move her hand, but I stopped her. "You're very likely going to be miserable if you're going to be with me." The crowd around me murmured, a few even laughing as if I had chosen this moment to crack a joke and lighten the mood. But I wasn't joking. I was being truthful. Being with me meant pain and suffering, a web of lies and deceit. I was no saint, and my past was beginning to catch up with me. No, it had already caught up to me. Being with me meant walking a difficult road, and I wanted to make that clear before it became too late. But at the same time, being with me also means that you'll have me forever. I took a deep breath, feeling a certain shake in my chest as I lowered my head and extended my hand. Being with me means you'll be the only person I'll ever think about and listen to. I paused, trying my best to keep my voice steady. Being with me means you'll be the only person that I'll love. The moment the words left my mouth, it was as though the world had been drained of sound. every eye turning toward me. I could feel the weight of their stares, yet none bore down as heavily as Delilah's gaze. Her gaze alone seemed to weigh down on me like a boulder. A massive boulder that pressed down on my back with every second that passed. But despite the pressure, I still managed to force out a few last words. "Will you dance with me?" The silence that followed was suffocating, so heavy it made me forget how to breathe. I kept my head lowered as my heart pounded in my ears, my palms growing slick with sweat, and my chest heaving faster with each breath. I felt the weight of the moment more than ever. And then, "No!" A clear resound "no" echoed across the room. It was a moment that nearly shattered my heart. Yet I lifted my head to meet her gaze. Her expression was cold, and her hand hovered just short of mine. I asked, "Is this your answer?" "Yes," Delilah answered, her gaze indifferent. I continued to stare at her for the next few seconds before smiling. "It's too bad for you that I don't take no for an answer." Reaching forward for her hand, I pulled her towards the main area where the others were dancing. My sudden move startled many, their expressions shifting sharply, but sensing no resistance from Delilah, I tuned out everything else and pulled her closer. "When are you going to stop messing around?" I held onto her right arm while placing my other hand around her waist. As the soft tune of the band played, I took a step back, Delilah following my lead as she drew closer to me. "When you also stop." "Me?" I smiled. "When was I messing around?" "Before." "But I wasn't messing around." The smile on my face faltered slightly. Sensing the change, Delilah's expression grew tense as well. However, I soon brought my smile back on. "I'd like to discuss this further later. This doesn't seem like the right place for such a conversation. But if there's one thing I must make clear, it's that none of what I said was a lie." Hearing my words, Delilah bit her lips. I could tell she had much she wanted to say, yet she restrained herself. She matched my movements, letting her steps fall in sync with mine as we moved to the rhythm of the music. In that moment, all the noise around us faded, leaving only the music in the air as we moved together to its rhythm. The stares, the voices, everything, it was all gone. All I could focus on was the woman before me. Tack. As her heel clicked against the floor, I stepped back, adjusting my hand as she drew closer, her face now just inches from mine. For a moment, I found myself getting lost in her eyes, the world around me coming to a sudden stop. But the moment was fleeting. Delilah pulled back, releasing one of my hands as she spun lightly, only to return to me moments later. I had never danced before in my life. I had learned it in the past, mostly from attending countless recent events, but I had never once had the chance to actually dance. It was the first time, and as I carefully guided Delilah in my arms, I found myself dancing freely, without fear or stiffness. I felt fluid. I felt happy, staring at the woman who moved in perfect sync with me. As if reading my every thought, I felt my heart racing faster and faster. The more I looked at her, the more mesmerized I became. Tack. We danced. We shifted the lead, and we even smiled at each other. In that moment, it was almost as if the entire world had completely faded from our minds. The only thing that existed was the two of us. Despite the music lingering in the air and the couples dancing around them, no one made a sound. All eyes were fixed on the two, struggling to take in the sight before them. Isn't that the child from the Ivinus family? Why is he dancing with her? Is it possible that he's the one? Murmurs and whispers rippled through the room. No one could believe the sight before them. Be it Aoife, Kira, Evelyn, or even the second prince. Nobody could understand the sight that greeted them. And yet, despite the skepticism around, Delilah and Julian continued to dance. Basking within the lights of the hall, it was as if they were the only two that existed. With each passing second, their movements grew more fluid, perfectly attuned to the music playing in the background. At once, all thoughts slipped away as everyone's gaze fixed on the couple, mesmerized by their presence. No one made a noise. They just stared as the two sliced the air with their movements, their fluidity feeling inhuman as they basked under the lights. Be it Delilah or Julian, their very presence was enough to captivate everyone in the room. And as the music began to slow, all eyes caught the soft smiles lingering on their faces. That was the moment that they all understood. Julian, he had been the fiancé all along. And soon, the music came to an end. Even as it drew to a close, the room remained silent, the pair still locked in each other's gaze. Until Julian's head lowered, and his lips met hers. On that day, Julian was officially recognized as Delilah's fiancé. That day, the couple shared their first true kiss. And that day, end of proof LVL2. Love, EXP plus 157%. Julian saw an all too familiar notification. Chapter 770. Dance, 4. Chapter 770. Dance, 4. The entire hall stood silent. All eyes were focused on the couple that stood in the middle. Although neither the two nor the Duke gave an official confirmation, the sight before them was more than enough to reveal who the fiancé truly was. It was none other than Julian Dacre Ivinus of the Ivinus household, a mere son of a count. The news was explosive, but nobody dared to move a single muscle in that moment. The tension held the room in place until the couple in question finally departed. It was only once the two were gone that the place truly exploded. What? How can this be? The son of a count? At first came the shock. Everyone had expected the fiancé in question to be a man of high nobility, someone closer to her age with a reputation that could rival hers, and, now that I think about it, it does make sense. He may be the son of a count, but the Ivinus household is thriving. Not only that, but he's also incredibly strong and still quite young. He even won the summit and is likely the strongest in his entire age group. His appearance is also. It quickly dawned on everyone that Julian's qualifications truly did make him a fitting partner for her. He was not only strikingly handsome but also exceptionally powerful. As a Tier 7 mage, he ranked among the strongest individuals in the world. And for him to still be in his early 20s? Rather than him lucking out, it was most likely the Duke who had lucked out. Though there was an age gap between them, it hardly mattered considering the lifespans of humans at their level of power. They could easily live 200, perhaps even 300 years. An age gap of 8 years was hardly anything. Now that I think about it, he is probably stronger than Delilah was at his age. Could he potentially? That's not very relevant. What matters isn't the speed, but how far you can climb. That's true. There's many that can get stuck in the same stage for years, never reaching the next stage. Yeah. But that's not the thing I'm most worried about. Suddenly, a suffocating tension settled over the room. Dozens of eyes shifted toward a single figure. His head bowed low, jaw clenched so tightly it seemed his teeth might shatter under the pressure. The chatter died down rather quickly as they looked at the prince. That was also the moment that many realized the crux of the situation. Julian. He was well known to be part of Aoife's camp. Having fought in the right against the prince, that fact was common knowledge. But if Julian, now revealed to be engaged to Delilah, still remained in Aoife's camp, then, the power balance has shifted towards the princess's side. All eyes soon fell on Aoife. And yet, despite the weight of all those stares, Aoife didn't react. She couldn't. The shock was too great, leaving her utterly frozen, incapable of any response. She wasn't the only one. Kira and Evelyn were both the same. The three stood with dumb expressions, their gazes lingering on the same spot where Julian had been present moments prior. The only one that didn't seem surprised was Leon, as he held onto the side of the table where the food was placed, and he held his throat with his other hand. Ugh! Gawk! He was making weird gagging sounds. His face was also extremely red. My eyes? He mumbled, gagging several more times. Nobody paid any real attention to him, as the main focus was on the princess. Thankfully, she was able to snap out of her daze rather quickly as she finally took notice of her surroundings. Immediately, she put on a professional expression as she took in the gazes. But before anyone could approach her, the Duke's voice echoed across the surroundings. It seems like no one was able to convince my daughter to change her mind. In the end, we still ended up going with the original fiancé. It's unfortunate, but this is for the best. I'm quite satisfied with my current son-in-law. The room fell silent again, but for a different reason this time. If the earlier scene had hinted at the fiancé's identity, the moment the Duke uttered the word son-in-law, all doubt vanished. But at the same time, doubts arose in the minds of all those present. If he was so certain about his son-in-law, why create such a scene? Why did he give a chance for everyone present to take her hand? Was it something done simply out of amusement? Or was there a deeper reason to the action? All eyes looked at the Duke suspiciously. And yet, the man in question seemed completely unbothered as he started to talk with the other people present, almost as if nothing happened. In the end, despite everyone's curiosity, nobody was able to figure out an answer. The party continued like that. Everything felt like a blur to me. I didn't know what came to me. No, I was completely aware of what I had done. I was conscious of it, and I had done it properly. It was what came after that felt like a blur. Before I knew it, I found myself in a completely different place. The cool breeze drifting through the air pulled me from my daze. I looked around and realized I was standing on a spacious balcony, bathed in the light of the moon above. Within the moonlight, a lock of black hair drifted in the air as I turned my attention towards the figure that basked within the moonlight. I hadn't taken a proper look at her due to everything that had happened, but looking at her now, I couldn't help but fall into a daze once more. From her flowing hair to her gentle smile, and the way her obsidian black locks framed her face as she gazed into the distance, basking in the moonlight. Everything about her, I was completely obsessed with it. I can't believe someone like her is my fiancé. I had never even thought I'd be able to get a girlfriend in my life, let alone a fiancé. I felt both happy and sad. Happy that something like this was possible and sad about what was to come. None of the words that I had previously said were a lie. Liking someone like me wasn't easy. The same was true for her. Liking the two of us wasn't easy. We both carried our own burdens, and as I thought about what she had gone through not long ago, a heavy weight settled on my heart. "What are you thinking about?" As if sensing my inner turmoil, Delilah's soft voice floated through the air. I turned to her, scratching the side of my face as I leaned against the marble railing, my gaze drifting absent-mindedly toward the moon. "A lot of things. Like, about what chocolate I should buy, why my fiancée is so pretty, how lucky I am to be with her," and a pair of hands clamped over my mouth before I could finish speaking. Startled, I turned to see Delilah pressing her hands against my face. Her head turned slightly away. My brows lifted in confusion, but it wasn't until I noticed how red her ears had become that I finally understood. "This girl." I pulled the hands away. "Weren't you the one who always told me to call her beautiful?" "I am calling you pretty. Very pretty. Why are you suddenly shy?" I smiled. Seeing her head turn more and more away from me, I couldn't help but lean closer to her, whispering nonsense like, "You're really pretty, you know? Very pretty. The most beautiful in the world." My words were once again cut off as Delilah pressed her hand against my mouth. I smiled, thinking that she was doing it because she was shy. However, flick, with a sudden motion, she cupped the bottom of my chin and forcefully tilted it toward her. Ugh. My eyes widened, but before I could think of anything, her cold eyes fell on me as her eyes flickered. "I'm not shy," so she said, but her ears were red. "Okay. I'm not. I know." Delilah's eyes flickered once more. I could feel the temperature getting colder as I felt a chill running down my back. Eventually, Delilah's lips pulled into a smile as she leaned her head closer to me. Bah, thump, bah, thump. I heard the loud beat of my heart inside my mind as she drew closer, her face a few inches away from mine. "I'm just trying to hold myself back." Boom. My thoughts scattered, and a numbness spread across my face. I stood frozen, utterly dazed, while Delilah continued to watch me, her expression shifting from an amused smile to a slow, seductive curve of her lips. And then, my turn. Her head leaned forward, and I felt a soft sensation on my lips. I froze for a moment, then let myself breathe, closing my eyes as I felt her warmth. The closeness of her body and the gentle touch of her hands sent a shiver down my spine. Before I realized it, we were holding each other, lost in the quiet intensity of the moment. I felt an euphoria I had never felt before, finding myself wanting more and more of that sensation as we lost ourselves in that sensation. I didn't know how long we went like this, but by the time we both pulled back, both our breaths were heavy as Delilah's obsidian eyes held a certain haze to her that made my blood boil. I wanted nothing more than to bring Delilah inside with me, but I held back. Staring at her, I extended my hand as she leaned her body closer to me, and we both stared towards the distant moon. A quiet, yet peaceful silence lingered in the air as we stood like that for several more minutes. By the time we both settled and fully realized what had happened, at least 10 minutes had slipped by, and I found myself smiling. "It wasn't short. Not a peck," Delilah replied, calm returning to her face. I brought her closer to me, feeling the warmth of her body and imprinting it deeply inside my mind. As I did, the smile and happiness that I felt a few moments prior began to fade. Instead, a certain heaviness settled over me as I gazed at Delilah. Sensing the shift in my demeanor, she met my eyes just as I closed them, taking a moment to steady myself. Then, opening my eyes again, I looked at her. Despite trying my best, I wasn't able to hide it. The sadness that I tried to keep sealed as my chest trembled. "What if I were to tell you?" I paused, biting my lips. That was probably the worst thing I could have said in that moment. After everything we'd been through, what I was about to do next could very well destroy the connection we had just begun to build. But it had to be done. What if I were to tell you that I'm Oracleus? Will you still try to kill me? Chapter 771. Goodbye, 1. Chapter 771. Goodbye, 1. The atmosphere froze over. It was almost as if time itself had stopped. The shift was noticeable as Delilah's gaze slowly turned in my direction. Her eyes, which had previously warmed up, suddenly turned different. It made my heart freeze, but I knew that I couldn't let that affect me. I had to come clean. Not just because I wanted to, but because I had to. For my future, If I were. It's not funny. Delilah cut me off, her body moving slightly away from me. I didn't pursue her and just kept my gaze on her as she moved several steps back while keeping her gaze on me. This is not funny, she repeated. The only thing I could do was smile at her. I know it isn't. Her eyes trembled for a moment, her eyes frosting over. I didn't pay any mind to it and just shifted my attention towards the distant moon. I'm sure you suspected that something has been wrong with me for quite some time now. You never said anything after some point, but you've always kept close tabs on me. I know that. Stop. I'm sure you're also aware of the fact that this isn't my true body, that I'm an external soul that has entered and taken over the entity known as Julian Dacre Ivinus. You've probably figured it out a while back, but just never said anything about it. I could tell. This had most likely happened during the time when my body had been possessed by Julian at the academy following the Pope incident. I had sensed a subtle change in her, but it wasn't obvious. It was clear to me now that this was most likely the moment she first realized the truth. It hasn't been long since I found out the truth myself, probably a couple of years by now. I wanted to tell you, but I cracked a smile, placing my hands onto the handrail and leaning back. I wasn't so sure it was a good idea, considering the state you had been in not long ago. With your hatred for the gods and everything they had done to you, it seemed more than justified. Truly did. I wouldn't blame you for wanting to kill all of the gods. I had been trying to do that myself. I forced out a laugh and shifted my gaze back to Delilah, who stood motionless in the moonlight, her hair stirring in the breeze, her eyes fixed intently on me. She didn't say a word. Nothing. She just stared at me with her cold black eyes. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but I was prepared for anything. Even if she tried to kill me on the spot, I was ready for it. I had gone through all the simulations in my mind and realized that I had no choice but to tell her the truth. I also realized why, up until now, Sithras had been keeping her alive. While he may say that he's discarded her, he still holds onto the hope that something might change in the future. His absolute trust in his strength was what made him dismiss her strength. In some sort of way, Delilah was a key to hurting the outer beings. Did you know? Delilah's voice broke in before I had the chance to say anything. It sounded steady, and yet, beneath the calmness, I caught the faint trembling that she tried so hard to disguise in her tone. Did you know about what happened to me? To that, I wasn't able to respond. Did I know? To some extent. However, I didn't know the details. I had only just learned it recently. To some extent, a terrifying pressure suddenly enveloped the surroundings. It was so powerful that, for a moment, I almost completely forgot how to breathe. If not for the fact that Delilah wasn't trying to kill me, I'd have probably died on the spot. You know, I opened my mouth, trying my best to say something to de-escalate the situation, but in the end, I nodded my head. Yes. Delilah's face twisted, and for the first time, I saw an expression that was truly filled with hatred. My heart seemed to stop, and the world around me fell into complete stillness. And yet, despite how the situation was turning out to be, I didn't panic. I knew that I didn't have to panic. I was quickly proven right as Delilah's face continued to change, switching from hatred to confusion to sadness, and then silence. In the end, she just stopped moving. I knew that this was my time to speak. I only found out recently, back in the mirror dimension when I talked with Panthea. Delilah's head twitched. She had most likely been aware of Panthea's presence back in the mirror dimension, or at least had an inkling. She didn't explicitly tell me that it was you, but it wasn't hard to figure out. She's also not aware of my true identity since I never revealed it to her, nor did I have the necessary means to be recognized as Oracleus. I had been thinking about it for quite some time, about the reason I had to die and give my blood away. While one of the reasons was because of Sithras, another one was probably so that I wouldn't arouse any suspicion from Panthea about my real identity and my goal. It had all been especially planned in advance so that it wouldn't happen. If I'm not the traitor and the same is true for Noel, then this makes sense. This was probably done in order to remain cautious against the other gods. There's no one that I can trust amongst the 6 others besides Noel. But these were all thoughts for later. Right now, there was nothing more important than the woman in front of me as I took a step forward. However, the moment I did, Delilah stepped back. She shook her head, and my hands dropped. I opened my mouth, ready to say something, but Delilah beat me to it. Is this what you meant before? About it being hard to be with you. I opened my mouth, closing it a moment later before eventually nodding. Yes, this was exactly why I said what I did. Being with me wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it would probably be incredibly hard. There's a lot weighing on me right now. A part of my past has caught up with me. One I can't avoid, even if I tried. What do you mean? I smiled at Delilah. or at least tried to smile. Despite my best efforts to reassure her, all that came out was a poor excuse for comfort. "I'll be leaving soon." "Leaving?" Delilah's face changed. Her previously tense expression faded, and in its place was a worried one. "Where are you going? For how long are you going?" Her voice grew quicker with each question she asked, seemingly understanding that the reason why I was saying all of this wasn't just because I wanted to come clean, but rather because I was going to say goodbye to her. "You're not going to?" Delilah stopped, biting her lips forcefully as her cold exterior began to fade. "You're not going to. I'm not going to die," I reassured her with a smile. This time, the smile was a lot more genuine. "I'll just be gone for quite some time." "How? How long?" "I don't know. Probably a while." "How long is a while? A year? 2 years? Maybe more." I didn't know myself. I'd hoped for it to be less, but I wasn't sure. This was something that I couldn't escape. No, this was more like fate. This was something that I had to do regardless of my will. "That long? That long?" I nodded, and the surroundings fell into a sudden silence. Delilah stood completely still, her expression turning distant, almost numb. I watched her for a moment, then took a step forward. This time, unlike before, she didn't move. I took another step, drawing closer to her. And then another, and then I stood right before her, wrapping my hands around her body and bringing her closer to mine. She didn't resist, and that was all I needed. In some way, this was her way of showing she was willing to wait. As I pulled her close, holding her tightly, trying to memorize the feeling, Delilah's soft voice whispered in my ear. "You're selfish." I paused, unsure of how to reply. But then I nodded. "I am." "You're a liar." "I am." "You're." Her body trembled, her arms moving as they clung to my back, squeezing just as hard as I did. I reciprocated her actions, bringing her body closer to me as I felt my chest squeeze. Not from joy, but from pain. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave her. Not when we had just established our relationship. But I had to. This right here was our goodbye. As I pulled my head back, our eyes met for the last time, and moments later, our lips found each other once more. We fell into the pleasure for one last time. Clank! Delilah closed the door quietly behind her and stood still, unmoving. Her face was cold, drained of any emotion, while her eyes flickered with something unreadable. It hadn't been long since Julian left, but with every passing minute, she felt her emotions slipping further away, fading into a cold emptiness. Her body trembled, and she understood exactly what was happening. I'm about to reach the zenith. The barrier that had been blocking her path for so long had started to break. Taking a few steps into the room, Delilah paused. For a brief moment, her heart clenched. A flood of memories surged back, overwhelming her and settling into her chest as she trembled. In truth, she still had a hard time accepting Julian's words. She didn't want to believe his words. How could he be Oracleus? Student, someone she had seen for the past years. The man who had managed to conquer her heart. But the more she thought about it, the more the possibility seemed real. Slowly, the dots began to connect, shedding light on so many of his past actions. In those last moments between the two of them, he had tried to explain a bit about his past, but Delilah stopped him before he could continue. She still wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Not in her current state, as she clutched her chest, her face growing paler with each passing second. Despite her best attempts at trying to hold the pain back, she wasn't able to as she covered her mouth with her trembling hand. "No, it's not his fault. He didn't lie to me," Delilah mumbled in her mind, stumbling forward. "Even if he is, it's clear that he's not the one who did it. He's a liar, but he had good reason not to tell. I can just kill the other ones. I don't have to kill him. I can. The trembling of Delilah's hands intensified as her eyes grew moist. An overwhelming sense of pain and guilt settled in her chest as she stumbled towards her bed, and warm streaks fell down the side of her cheeks. Her chest trembled. She too hadn't been honest. Her hatred for the gods didn't just stem from the fact that she hated them for what they had done to her. No, truth was their death meant her survival. She couldn't live unless they all died. For that reason, they needed to die. Chapter 772. Goodbye, 2. Chapter 772. Goodbye, 2. Following the announcement and the reveal of the fiancé, the party carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations continued, laughter echoed, and music played. Yet a subtle tension lingered, threading through the guests as if the room itself had taken note of the change. The tension wasn't very high, but there was a clear divide as a noticeable shift occurred among the guests. If the Princess faction held a slight advantage moments prior, that was no longer the case, as a clear shift had occurred in the succession battle. with Julian officially becoming the son-in-law of the Rosenberg household, and in turn gaining the allegiance of the current head of Central and the strongest duchy around, the momentum had shifted entirely to Aoife's side. "I wish you the best, princess." "Thank you. That's very kind of you." The nobles who had been undecided just moments before now clustered around her, striking up conversations as she responded with a carefully measured smile. "Of course, I remember you. It was back in the Nokshire party, correct?" "Yes. I remember the conversation that we had, leaving a deep impression on me." Aoife was rather eloquent. Having practiced seriously, she knew how to handle all of the guests, even going as far as spending the previous week just memorizing all of the guests present and recalling any interactions she had with them in the past. "I wish we could continue the conversation we had last time." "It would be my pleasure." It was her eloquence that turned the mood upbeat, her reputation growing within the factions. The flow continued for several hours, the mingling and forced smiles persisting, until the party finally drew to a close. Aoife took her chance to slip away, moving further back where Kira and Evelyn were waiting. "I think my jaw is stuck," Aoife mumbled, massaging her jaw. "I think my stomach is about to leave my body." Kira replied not long after, her voice hoarse while she held onto her stomach. "Just thinking about your face, and that forced smile of yours. That's mean." "Slap," Evelyn suddenly interjected, lightly slapping Kira's back. "Oi! Stop." Aoife stopped the two before the situation escalated. Knowing the two of them, they very well could start a fight over something as light as this. Brushing her hair back, she looked around. "It's a good thing that the party is coming to an end. I honestly couldn't take it any longer." She honestly felt quite beat. While she had gotten used to putting on a face when talking with the other nobles, it was still tiring. She would much rather be with Kira and Evelyn. At the very least, she didn't need to talk in circles with them. But putting everything aside, her mind couldn't help but drift toward the cause of everything. "I can't believe this actually happened. When did it even start?" She was just as stunned as everyone else had been at the revelation. It was just that she had to snap out of it rather quickly, as she had to take advantage of the situation presented to her. However, now that everything had settled and the reality of the situation had fully registered, the shock finally surfaced in her heart, sending ripples of unease through it. "Don't you guys find it odd?" Aoife looked at Kira and Evelyn. "How did Julian end up with the Chancellor? I don't think I've ever seen the two of them talk much." "Wasn't he her assistant, though?" Evelyn interjected, tilting her head. "From what I remember, he was her assistant for quite some time. They may have developed some sort of relationship then." "You think so?" Aoife mumbled, still struggling to accept the explanation. It simply didn't make sense to her. Everyone knew the Chancellor. She was a cold and untouchable figure, someone almost no one could ever hope to reach. From her strength, which had no rival, to her beauty, which even Aoife had to admit was on another level. And yet, Julian had somehow gotten engaged to that very same woman. Was it truly because he was her assistant? Actually, as if suddenly recalling something, Evelyn's face turned strange. "What is it?" Kira asked, growing somewhat curious at Evelyn's suspicious behavior. Biting her lips, Evelyn's expression changed a couple of times, struggling to bring herself to speak. It took Kira's sharp words to make her speak as she mumbled, "Fine, fine." Looking up at Aoife, she explained, "There was an accident that happened a while back. It was during the time that I went to visit the estate with my father. Julian and I both feared that we'd get engaged together. So Julian randomly said he'd like to marry Delilah. It was supposed to be an exaggeration for the sake of the moment, but who would have thought that?" Evelyn stopped there, her expression turning even more complex. The more she thought about the situation, the weirder it felt to her. "You serious?" Kira looked at Evelyn with her jaw slack, prompting Evelyn to nod her head. The Duke was also there. Julian wasn't aware of his identity back then. "What? Huh?" Kira and Aoife both made odd faces, but soon Kira's expression started to twist, the situation finally sinking in her mind as she started to shiver. Holding onto the sides of her arms, she mumbled, I'm cringing. Shit. Seriously?" Aoife didn't feel exactly the same as Kira, but she, too, felt subtle hints of secondhand embarrassment from the story. "Yes." Evelyn nodded, prompting Kira to cringe even further. "I think Leon was also there. If I'm not wrong." "Huh." Evelyn turned toward where Leon had been moments prior, but paused when she realized that he was gone. "Leon? Where's Leon?" Blinking her eyes, she looked around. Wasn't he here just a moment ago? How did he? The moon hung bright, its light spilling over the land below as a man stood beneath it, gazing upward and taking a deep, steadying breath. As he did, Leon's eyes opened as his soft voice echoed in the air. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you," a voice whispered in response as Julian stepped forward, coming to a stop right beside him. He, too, raised his head to look at the moon. The two stood in silence, neither uttering a word. There was no need to say a word between the two of them understood each other perfectly. They lingered in the silence for several minutes, until Julian finally broke it. "I'll be leaving soon." "I know," Leon replied, his hand rising to his chest. The powerful sense of dread he had felt earlier still clung to him. It had grown even stronger, and though he was managing it better this time, his back remained drenched in sweat. Still, despite his best attempts at trying to ignore the sensation, he couldn't escape it. The sense of dread only grew more with each passing second. There were many things he wanted to ask Julian, but he held himself back. In the end, the only thing he found himself able to ask was, "How long will you be gone for?" "I don't know," Julian replied, his gaze still locked onto the distant moon. "It'll be a while for sure, perhaps a year or maybe more. I can't quite tell myself, since I am unsure of what will happen. This is all still new to me, and I've hardly had the time to process it." "I see," Leon nodded. Although Julian was trying his best to keep his voice steady and calm, Leon could feel the pain and desperation within it. He could tell that Julian didn't want any of this to happen. He was scared himself. However, it also appeared that he couldn't run away from it. He had to face it. "Here." Suddenly, Julian pulled his attention away from the moon and handed something to Leon. "This is?" Leon looked at the item, pausing the moment he caught a glimpse of it as he looked at Julian. "This is. I need you to hold on to this for me. It'll be important for the future. Like I said, you're the only one I can trust with this." Leon's face trembled as he stared at the item in Julian's hand, fully aware of what it was. He could feel the weight of the responsibility that the item held as his shoulders suddenly felt heavier. In the end, however, he nodded and reached for it. "I understand." He put the item away, prompting Julian to smile. "Thank you. I feel much better knowing that you're by my side." Leon didn't reply. Normally, he would have felt disgusted by comments like these, but this time he didn't. He held onto his chest. The feeling of dread grew even thicker, so thick that he almost forgot how to breathe. Just what is?" "Don't worry about it," Julian replied, his gaze drifting back to the moon. "Just remember everything I've previously told you. To me, it'll only feel like a few minutes, but I know it will be a very long time. The only one who can bring me back is you. That's why I hope you take care of yourself while I'm gone. Oh, and..." Julian's gaze shifted slightly, as if recalling something important. "Whatever you do, keep everything to yourself. Even if the others press you for answers, don't say anything. This is all for your safety." Leon's lips opened, seemingly trying to say something, but Julian's next action caused him to stop at once. With a slow shift in his body, he extended his hand in his direction. As he did, his smile grew brighter. "Take care." The world grew silent in that moment, Leon's heart coming to a stop. But soon, staring at the outstretched hand, he calmed himself down. Reaching forward, he grasped the hand and shook it. "Take care. I'll be seeing you soon. MHM. Julian nodded, letting go of Leon's hand and nudging his chin toward the venue in the distance. "You should go now." "I..." Leon opened his mouth but eventually closed it and nodded before turning away and walking back toward the venue. "Goodbye." As his last words drifted in the air, Julian's gaze remained fixed on his retreating back, only feeling his shoulders relax once he saw him disappear into the forest as he entered the venue. Well, that's that. He had wanted to say goodbye to more people, but this wasn't something he could do. Everything had hit him so suddenly and so abruptly that he wasn't able to plan the way he left. But it's better this way. It wasn't that he didn't want to tell others more about the situation, it was more like he couldn't. To keep the future the same, this was something he had to do. Eventually, Julian closed his eyes. Swoosh! A cold breeze wafted through, causing his clothes to flutter. He didn't know how long had passed, but by the time he opened his eyes again, a figure stood before him. One whose features were no longer faceless as he greeted me with a smile. "It looks like you were expecting me." Chapter 773. Goodbye, 3. Chapter 773. Goodbye, 3. It was different compared to before. If before he gave me a deep sense of dread whenever he appeared, it wasn't the case this time. He looked calm, just like the surroundings. And yet, it was the strange calmness with which he carried himself that made my heart palpitate the most. "I came as soon as I managed to absorb all of the blood. You know why I'm here, right?" His voice was soft too. Staring into the distance and then back to him, I took a good look at his real appearance for once. Or at least what I thought was his real appearance. "Ha! So that's how it was. It's been a while, Inquisitor Hollow." Torrin smiled. "It has indeed been a while, Julian." His smile was the same as it was in the past. That calm, yet very reassuring smile of his. I thought back to my past interactions with him and started to understand better. You knew from the start, right? More or less. I can't say that I was certain, but there aren't many people who enjoy the same type of comedy that I do. It was indeed nice to know that there was someone out there who enjoyed the same type of comedy that I do, right? It felt almost like I was speaking with an old friend, and for a brief moment, the warmth of that thought made it seem real. Yet the memory of why he was here crept back into my mind, and the smile slowly drained from my face, leaving behind a heaviness I could no longer ignore. You're here to take the remaining blood? Is that correct? Yes and no, Torin replied, turning his gaze towards the distant venue. While I would love to, I'm not in any state to do so. It already took a great deal out of me to absorb what belonged to that puppet you created from the church. I doubt I could take in any more blood even if I wanted to. It may be at least 5 years before I'm able to attempt something like this again. Oh, this was a little unexpected. However, when I thought about it, it began to make sense. For me and Noel to do everything that we wanted, without him interfering or doing anything, I guess it must have taken a heavy toll on him just to try and absorb my blood. It'll likely be the same when he absorbs the next half. In that case, are you here just to collect it before it's too late? Torin's smile widened at my words. That's exactly it. He laughed a little while looking at me. You're too much of a variable. Your growth is also astounding. I can't let you keep growing stronger. It'll be too dangerous for me. I'm a little touched you think of me that way. Then again, he wasn't wrong. I was indeed quite the astounding talent. There were hardly any people, if any at all, who had reached the same rank as me at my age. Of course, it wasn't like I had done so without any help. I had plenty of help in order to reach the state that I was in. You don't need to be touched about a little praise. In the end, this is just the truth. You should also be aware of the fact that you're not just anybody. If you say so. The conversation between the two of us was still light. However, the more I talked, the more I could feel the air of finality within the conversation. It was drawing closer and closer to the end that I couldn't stop. These right here were probably going to be my last moments for quite some time. I planned on asking everything that I could. Why did you do the things that you did to her? Raising his brow, Torin blinked his eyes. He looked confused at first, but soon he showed a look of understanding. Right. You just had an engagement. I heard all about it. Congratulations. He looked rather amused. I was a little taken aback when I found out about your engagement. I found out a few hours ago, just a little bit before I could make my way here. You can't believe how shocked I was when I heard about your engagement. It came as a massive surprise to me, but I also realized that it made sense. Torin suddenly leaned closer to me. His eyes glued to my face as his voice lowered into a whisper. You are trying to reach the same goal as I am. It's only natural that you'd want to experience love. I also do admit that the little girl is quite pretty. His lips suddenly pulled into a wide and creepy smile. I just didn't think you'd truly go for someone like he. You still haven't answered my question. I cut Torin off before he could go on with his nonsense. Why did you do what you did? I just really wanted to understand the true motives behind his actions. Was it simply because he wanted to create someone who was capable of fighting against the outer beings? Or was there more to it than I knew? The smile on Torin's face faded slightly. He just stared at me for a couple of seconds before sighing and moving back. There were many reasons I did what I did. Above all, I wanted to fashion a weapon that could be used against them. By them, he meant the outer beings. And you didn't think it'd backfire on you? Oh, many times, Torin replied, his voice light. The thought truly crossed my mind many times. Then what? Torin tilted his head. Are you asking me why I'd keep her alive even if there was a possibility of all of this backfiring on me? It's simple, really. Torin's voice lowered. I just didn't think of her as a threat. Besides you, there's no one who can threaten me. This isn't arrogance. This is the simple truth. In this world, there's no one stronger than me or who will ever be stronger than me. To some extent, you can even think of her as a failure. While she was indeed able to become strong, and she might very well reach the zenith too, at the end of the day she can't grasp the source. There's little she can do when she can't grasp the source. She isn't a threat. But what if she can? Then that would mean that my experiment worked. Torin's face, even if she does end up being a threat further down the line, the fact that she managed to touch upon the source means that the experiment went well. It means that I can create even more like her. Tapping onto his chest, his words hastened. If I can replicate the experiment and make more like her, I could produce countless beings to fight them. They might not be as strong individually, but an army of such creations would soon be enough to overthrow them and free the world from their tyranny. Torin's gaze flickered with madness as he spoke. This is why it's so important that she's allowed to roam free. She might be a failure for now, but if she manages to succeed, If that's the case, then it would mean that the path that I'm pursuing is correct. Either way, I don't lose. The madness was all too clear in his gaze. And yet, despite the madness, I could see a certain clarity within them. I could see that he had thoroughly thought about things carefully, and even though I wanted to argue against him, I found that I couldn't. His words, they made sense. And it was the realization that made my heart clench. It's a pity, though. Torin's voice lowered, bringing me out of my thoughts as I looked at him. What's a pity? Your body, Torin replied, pointing at me and prompting me to raise my brow. What could he? It's a mess. I can see that you've allowed yourself to be polluted by them. He shook his head, and I finally understood. He was talking about the weird black tendrils that had clouded my body. I thought about the discovery and how I had originally planned on asking Delilah about it. This was the original plan. However, given everything that had happened, I knew that asking would lead to nothing. Not because she didn't know, but because it was useless. There was no stopping what was about to happen to me. I'd just be wasting time. Are you ready? Torin's soft words whispered next to my ear, bringing chills down my entire body as I froze. My lips trembled, and I wanted to shake my head. However, I knew that this wasn't something that I could avoid. I was simply too weak. I couldn't escape him even if I wanted to. In the end, the only thing I could do was close my eyes and mumble, "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Me? Sure?" His tone almost sounded mocking as he paused. "Why wouldn't I be sure? You should know very well that I must do this in order to accomplish my goal." "No, I'm not talking about that." My face grew relaxed as I looked at him, my voice growing colder at the same time. Although I wasn't sure, it almost felt as though a certain figure had appeared beside me, pressing his hand onto my shoulder as I spoke his direct words. "There's nothing that can escape my grasp. I've seen and witnessed everything there is to witness. When I ask if you're sure you want to do this, what I'm really asking is whether you've considered if this was something I had planned in advance." I stopped right at the end of my sentence as a thought settled in my mind. In the end, I smiled and laughed. "Never mind. Regardless of what you do, you'll always dance inside the palm of my hand. Do what you wish, I never had the chance to finish my sentence. My vision turned black right after. Thump. A body limply fell on the floor. A pair of cold eyes stared at the body. Torin's face was cold. So cold that it seemed to chill the surroundings. Swoosh. Not long after, a figure appeared behind him. His expression was complicated as he stared at the body on the floor. He could tell that he was still alive, his chest rising and falling slowly. Just as Atlas opened his mouth, Torin opened his mouth. "It's gone." His expression turned colder upon muttering those words. The temperature plummeted further, and for a moment, Atlas felt his heart clench, an overwhelming fear gripping his heart. Thankfully, the sensation didn't last for long as Torin calmed down shortly after. He turned his attention towards Atlas. "Isn't he your disciple?" "Ah, yes." Atlas nodded slowly, his chest tensing further under Torin's gaze. Just when he found the tension unbearable, Torin spoke up. "I've broken the seal inside his body. Take good care of him. He might not be the same person, but the body is the same. The talents should still be there. Make sure he doesn't die since I still need his body further down the line." With those words, Torin's body began to fade. "Oh," but right as his body completely faded, as if recalling something, Torin added, "It's time that we stop being so passive. Get everything ready. From this moment forth, the Inverted Sky and every sister organization should do their best to leave an imprint on this world. It's about time we set our plans in motion." His body disappeared completely right after that. Atlas stood in silence, struggling to process the words. But soon, twitch, twitch, Julian's body began to twitch. Atlas's gaze fell on the body, and not long after, the eyes snapped open. "Wapa!" Julian took a deep breath, his expression twisting at the same time as he hastily looked around. "Where the fuck is this? What's going on?" His shouts echoed within the forest as his gaze wandered from left to right. In the end, his gaze fell on Atlas as his gaze contorted. "Hey bastard! Where the fuck?" "Shoo!" Atlas pressed his finger on his mouth, stripping Julian of his voice as he quietly stared at him. Julian's eyes widened at the sight, his face changing as he tried to say something. But Atlas didn't allow him as he quietly spoke up. "My name is Atlas, and I've been tasked to train you." Looking at Julian and seeing his current defiant expression, Atlas closed his eyes and sighed. "This will take a long time." Waving his hand, the two disappeared shortly after that. From that day, the Inverted Sky made its name known to the world. The same was true for each sister organization. They rapidly spread their influence throughout the world. Unknown superpowers began to emerge across the world, completely upending the established powers, seizing territory from empires, and igniting a prolonged war that led to many casualties. Of such power, one became especially infamous. Julian Dacre Ivinus, the low seat of madness. Chapter 774. A Villain 1. Chapter 774. A Villain 1. Crackle. The fire raged on. It crackled in the air, devouring the timber beams one by one. Windows shattered under the heat, spilling glass like falling stars, while tongues of flame licked greedily at the curtains, swallowing them whole in a single breath. The estate groaned. Smoke coiled upward in choking plumes, blotting out the night sky, while embers rained down on the ground. A figure stood outside the fire, staring at the raging fire with a blank expression. Crackle! Crackle! The faint sound of screams echoing in the background. People rushing in and out, screaming at him. Leave this place. You must run, family head. Run before it's too late. You must save yourself. Family head. Aha! A tremor ran down the figure's body, the haze in his eyes clearing as he snapped out of it. His lips quivered as he did. I should have known. He brought his hand to his chest, slowly clenching it. Why did I not do it? Why did I not kill him when I had the chance? Tears streamed down his face, smearing the ash that had settled on his face. It had all happened incredibly quickly, but he could still remember it all vividly. A purple dome that covered the entire area. Hands that shot out from beneath the ground, grasping at the maids and workers in the estate. Screams. Falling bodies. The night group coming, but inevitably getting pushed back. Captain Albaz's shouts. Linus could recall all of it as he stood numbly, replays of the scenes flashing in his mind. But in particular, if there was one thing that he could remember, it was the cold figure that stood at the center of it all. His gaze was cold, so cold that it almost felt chilling. But at the same time, he saw it. The madness hidden within his gaze. I should have. All that was left was regret. He thought that possibly the nightmares were fake, that Julian had changed. But that wasn't the truth. He had always been the same. The nightmares weren't fake. They were a premonition of the future that was to come. If only he could have trusted them. All of this, it was on him. Hiya! Hearing another scream, Linus slowly turned his head. Right, I still need to help. His body was heavy, and he could barely stand. He had fought alongside the guards, but even he was helpless. It was just one person, but he was enough to completely overwhelm him. Help! Someone help me! Stumbling back towards the raging fire, Linus used his last bits of energy to help anyone who was in need. One more. Just one more. Princess, the situation is dire. There's been an attack in Ivinus County. Reports say the main estate is in flames. For now, the assaults have halted there, but we believe they will continue. A figure sat on a throne, her cold gaze flickering upon hearing the report. Her long red hair cascaded down her shoulders as her yellow eyes shone under the dim lighting of the room. She sat in silence, a silent pressure coming down on the room before she nodded. I understand. You may leave. But princess, did I not make myself clear? Although Aoife didn't shout, the pressure that came out of her voice was enough to cause the attendant to shiver as she hurriedly closed her mouth and left the room, leaving Aoife sitting in silence. The silence stretched on as she looked ahead. How much time had passed since he turned? Aoife had started to forget. It all happened suddenly. It wasn't instant. It was gradual. Aoife had been so busy with the succession that she had never gotten the chance to pay close attention to him. Still, he was useful to her. He helped her push her brother onto the brink of destruction. But that was when it happened. Strange, powerful figures appeared out of nowhere, striking the Empire from multiple fronts. They were brutal and efficient, each attack felt calculated, and all the momentum she had fought to build crumbled away. Aoife tried to resist, but they were incredibly powerful. They drove her onto a path of retreat, and it was only after a year of relentless battles that she managed to find the slightest semblance of balance. Perhaps it was the unending stress of battle or the relentless threats she faced, but her abilities began to surge at an astonishing pace. In only a year spent at the front lines, she broke through from the 6th tier to the 7th, a feat that would have taken others far longer. Even then, her progress showed no signs of slowing, hinting at even greater heights yet to come. Her growth was so astonishing that it started to make her question herself. Is my growth really because of all the dangers that I faced, or is there more to it? She wasn't entirely sure, but this wasn't a change that she disliked. The more powerful she became, the greater say she would have with her army and citizens. Do you really think it's a coincidence? Suddenly, a voice pierced the silence surrounding her. Aoife turned to her left and was met with a smile, one worn by a figure that looked far too much like herself. Aoife didn't react to her sudden appearance. She had grown used to it by now. Is this your doing? Haha. The figure smiled, her smile stretching all the way to her eyes. There's no such coincidence in this world. One does not simply become this strong from just battle. Her finger pressed onto the bottom of Aoife's chin, lifting it up slightly as the pair of yellow eyes met. The power that we hold within our bodies is immense. Far stronger than you can ever imagine. You've only just started to tap into it because you've started to become of age, but it won't be long until you gain full access to it. Once that happens, nothing will stop us. We'll be able to rule this world. Aoife's yes grew hazy upon hearing the words. Rule the world? It didn't sound too bad. In fact, it sounded rather tempting. But I'll think about it. Aoife's eyes snapped out of their haze as she looked ahead. The figure next to her faded, and the doors slowly began to open. Kriawak, a figure appeared shortly after. Clad in a black hood, their features were obscured. Yet Aoife didn't need to see their face to recognize them. When the hood was finally lowered, a pair of haggard gray eyes stared back at her. A pair of yellow eyes met a pair of gray. You look terrible. In the end, Aoife was the one to break the silence as she looked at Leon. Her words held a lot of truth. Leon's current state was terrible. Heavy dark circles sagged beneath his eyes. His face was drained of color, and his lips were cracked and dry. It was clear he hadn't known proper rest in a very long time. And that was probably the truth. Ever since the incident with Julian, he had been different. Aoife's face turned colder at the thought. What are you here for? Leon's lips quivered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on her, seemingly trying to get his words out. What is it? What are you struggling too hard to say? Are you going to tell me how the Julian that is currently rampaging the Empire isn't the same Julian that I know? Aoife suddenly smirked. I'm not that stupid. I can tell that there's something wrong. Even so, her eyes flickered with a cold and dangerous light. It doesn't change the fact that he's become a monster. If you're here to tell me to stop, Fi. And no. A hoarse voice cut Aoife off, prompting her to stop as she looked at Leon. No? What are you? I am not going to stop you, Leon answered a moment later, his voice growing even hoarser. His words caused Aoife to pause as she took a good look at him. You're not going to stop me? And no. Leon shook his head, blinking his tired eyes. I'm not going to stop you, he repeated, trying to make sure she heard him correctly. His sudden actions prompted Aoife to frown as she slowly stood up from her throne. You're saying that you're going to allow me to kill Julian? Or whoever that person is? If you must. Leon nodded slowly. Aoife's eyes narrowed, her thoughts racing as she tried to discern Leon's intentions. Yet the longer she studied him, the clearer it became just how serious he truly was. In the end, her face relaxed and she sighed. Relax. I'm not going to do anything to him yet. Not because I don't want to, but because it's impossible for me to do so. The Empire was in a state of turmoil. Julian wasn't the only individual that she needed to worry about. There were several others. The issue lay in the fact that the other empires were also struggling to handle the current situation. Her empire wasn't the only one that had been attacked by these strange forces. All empires were facing the same situation. Normally, Aoife wouldn't have worried so much about the situation. Her empire was powerful, and with notable figures like Delilah, it would usually be hard for any external force to do anything to them. But this was the problem. Things would be calm if Delilah were present. However, after the announcement of her engagement, which occurred several years back, she vanished entirely from the Empire and from the world itself. It was as if her very existence had been erased. Many had tried to get in touch with the Duke, but even he wasn't sure. In the end, the situation turned out like it had because of her disappearance. Had she not? No, there's no use thinking about it. There were no what-ifs in this world. The situation had already unfolded as it had. All she could do now was look ahead and try to find a way out of the predicament she faced. Lost in her thoughts, she failed to notice the subtle shift in Leon's expression. He closed his eyes, sensing a faint pulse emanating from his chest. As the rhythm grew, his features began to change, and he instinctively brought his hand to the spot where the chalice rested. Feeling the pulse, Leon's lips parted. A conversation from long ago echoed in his mind, and the hand pressed against his chest clenched tightly. Could this be the signal? Could he finally stop this hell from continuing any further? Clank! The doors of the room burst open, and a figure rushed in. Princess! Her voice was panicked, bringing both Leon and Aoife's attention towards her. Just before Aoife could say a word, the attendant shouted, "We've managed to stop the seed of madness." He. The attendant swallowed, quickly catching her breath as she resumed. He's in the mirror crack in Bremer. Leon's face changed as the sensation in his chest settled. It was there that he understood. His hell it was finally going to come to an end. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.